Today's lesson is called Good Health, It's All in the Mind. Hi everyone, my name is Jeff.
My name is Roger, and today we're talking about having good health, both in mind and body. And it turns out that they are closely related to each other. Mental health kind of depends on physical health and vice versa.
So, there is this saying in English, mind over matter. Apparently, there is more to this saying than I originally thought. Mind over matter. What do you mean? You think it and it becomes true? Oh, hogwash. Well, apparently, maybe your mind does matter. Maybe if you think in a healthy way, your body will be healthier too. So if you want good health, maybe you need to start with having a healthy mind. So there you go. There's the title. Good health. It's all in the mind. It's mind over matter. Think positive, everyone. Healthy mind, healthy body, happy wife, happy life. Anyways, folks, with that, it's time for us to take a short break. But don't go away. We'll be right back after this.
Good health? It's all in the mind. The idea that our mental states and internal organs are in some way connected is deeply ingrained in our culture. It is reflected in our languages. Have you ever had a gut feeling about something, or perhaps a visceral reaction to something? And in many of our cultural practices. Traditional Chinese medicine, for example, has long claimed connections between various emotions and internal organs, with both the organs and the emotions able to equally affect one another.
大家好，第一部分我们看到单字 ingrained， 这个字是形容词，指想法或是观念根深蒂固的。例如 In Japan, politeness is ingrained in much of the behavior of the people. 在日本，恭敬有礼多深植于人民的行为中。或是The widespread use of technology is deeply ingrained in the current generation of children. 科技的广泛使用深植于现在这一代的孩子。
Okay, so we're asking the question, what about good health? If you want to have good health, well, it's all in the mind. And yes, if you have a positive attitude, then you'll probably have good health. But I think also this article mentions that good physical health will make you healthy in the mind as well. They're kind of interconnected. So let's look at the first paragraph here. It says, the idea that our mental states and internal organs are in some way connected is deeply ingrained in our culture. Most people think this way. Yes, indeed. Our mental states, our emotional well-being is connected to our internal organs, which would be, our liver and our heart and kidneys and pancreas and stuff like that. Those are all our internal organs. And yes, our mental states and our internal organs are somehow connected.
There you go. And this idea is deeply ingrained in our culture, i.e., at a very deep level, we feel this and we believe this. This idea is not going anywhere anytime soon. This is not an idea that we're going to forget about tomorrow or the next week or the next month or in our lifetimes, because this is deeply ingrained in us, this belief. It's deeply implanted, it's deep-seated, it's deeply rooted, it's fixed and established within ourselves. It's hardwired in us, so to speak. It's going to be with us well into the future. Anyways, it is reflected in our languages, i.e., have you ever had a gut feeling about something, or perhaps a visceral reaction to something? And in many of our cultural practices. By the way, yes, I have had a gut feeling before. Sometimes I know something makes no sense, or I have a feeling that someone's lying to me, let's say, and I can't explain to you why it is, I just know it in my gut, and not even in a conscious way, it's just there. It's a gut feeling, or for me, I call it more like an intuition.
Yeah, when I met my brother-in-law for the first time, I just had this gut feeling that he had a hot temper, and it turned out to be true. He gets mad really easily. It was a gut feeling. I can't explain why I felt that way. I just knew it. And we also have something called a visceral reaction. If something's visceral, it's basically totally emotional. It's not at all logical, or it doesn't have anything to do with reason. It's just totally based on your emotions. So you have some kind of emotional reaction to something. And yes, sometimes this does happen, and we can't explain these feelings.
Yeah, and Western medicine really doesn't concern itself too much with those feelings. Let's say if you go to a psychiatrist and you've got anxiety these days, they don't really want to explore the sources of your anxiety or anything like that. They'll say, okay, your anxiety will go away now if you take this pill. But traditional Chinese medicine, for example, has long claimed connections between various emotions and internal organs, with both the organs and the emotions able to equally affect one another. Now, can any of these associations be scientifically proven, or can they be documented definitively? I don't know, but it's interesting that for a long time that people have documented these associations and do have some hypotheses that Western medicine hasn't come up with itself. Okay, folks, with that, it's time for us to take a break, but don't go away. We'll be back with the second portion of our lesson after this.
Although modern Western medicine does not make these connections explicit, recent studies have found important relationships between certain emotional states and the well-being of certain internal systems. And these relationships have some interesting implications when it comes to maintaining both emotional and physical health.
第二部分，我们看到名词 well-being， 指健康、安乐或是幸福。例如，Our teacher not only wants us to learn, but she also cares about our well-being. 我们老师不只要求我们学习，他也关心我们的身心健康。或是 This past week, Trevor lost both his job and his girlfriend, so we're all quite concerned about his emotional well-being. 过去这一周 Trevor 双双失去工作和女友，所以我们都很担心他的情绪健康。再来，我们看到单字 implication。这个字是名词，指含义或是暗指。举例来说 One of the implications of living alone is having to pay all of the bills. 自己住的其中一个含义包括缴纳全部的账单。另外，补充这个字的动词 imply, I-M-P-L-Y, imply, 指暗示或是暗指。我们可以说Although he didn't say it directly, he implied that he wanted us to leave. 虽然他没有直说，但他暗示他想要我们离开。或是 His decision to buy a house seems to imply a desire to get married. 他要买房子的决定似乎意味着想要结婚的渴望。
Now, although modern Western medicine does not make these connections explicit, it doesn't come out and say these things the way that traditional Chinese medicine does, recent studies have found important relationships between certain emotional states and the well-being of certain internal systems. So, maybe Western medicine doesn't come out and say it. All right, this emotion is connected to a certain organ. But it has started to document the relationship between well-being and certain internal systems. Not internal organs, but certain systems.
Indeed. Okay, so yes, these connections are explicit, or at least they're not explicit, rather. They're not clearly stated. Back to this word explicit here. I remember many years ago I asked this EMT, an emergency medical technician, to describe the motorcycle accident that he saw, and he was quite explicit. He gave me all the gory details, and I actually had nightmares as a result of his explicit description. So yes, indeed, we're talking about these connections, but they're not explicit in Western medicine. They may think that there are some connections, but they're not exactly sure about them, and they can't give us any concrete examples. But it goes on to say recent studies have found important relationships between certain emotional states and the well-being of certain internal systems. So well-being basically just refers to how healthy you are. Humans' capacity for being healthy, that's your well-being. And, of course, we've got some internal systems, and those, of course, are your various systems. I guess the digestive system and the nervous system and stuff like that. There is a connection between those systems and your general health or well-being.
And these relationships have some interesting implications when it comes to maintaining both emotional and physical health. So if what Western medicine is saying is true, there are going to be some interesting consequences or some interesting implications when it comes to maintaining both emotional and physical health. Apparently, emotions will affect your physical health, and maintaining your physical health will have an effect on your emotional health.
Indeed, and of course here we've got the word physical. That's kind of the opposite of the word emotional. Physical just refers to the body itself, the bones, the muscles, the organs, and stuff like that, as opposed to the mind or the brain or the emotions. Okay, so yeah, we're talking about emotional health and physical health and how they are related. Okay, let's move on now to the third and final portion of our lesson for today. We will listen first.
A prime example of this phenomenon is the gut-brain connection. The bacteria in the gut don't just help process food. They also produce chemicals called neurotransmitters that regulate your mood. Notably, this gut-brain connection is bidirectional. Stress has been found to negatively affect gut bacteria, just as poor gut health can negatively affect a person's mood. A disturbed gut, in other words, affects a person's mood, which in turn further affects a person's gut, and so on.
第三部分，我们看到形容词 prime， 指最典型的、主要的或是基本的。例如 The campsite was a prime location for watching wildlife. 这个营地是观察野生动物的主要地点。另外，除了上面的意思，这个字还有以下几种用法。第一是指最好的、第一流的，像是 Prime cuts of meat tend to be more tender and flavorful, but also more expensive. 上选切片肉通常比较软嫩、好吃，但也比较贵。第二，这个字当名词时，可指全盛时期。举例来说，The fighter never lost a match while he was in his prime. 那名拳击手在全盛时期没有输过任何一场比赛。第三，这个字还可以当动词，指事先指导、预报或是预告。我们可以说 The MC primed the crowd for the show. 那位主持人向观众预告节目内容。接着，我们看到单字 notably. 这个字是副词，指值得注意的、显然的或是格外的。举例来说 The guests were notably impressed by the food offered at the party. 宾客对派对上的食物感到格外惊喜。最后，我们看到片语 in turn 表示转而或是因而。举例来说 My mother taught me to sew, and I in turn taught my own daughter. 我妈妈教我缝纫，继而我又教自己的女儿。另外，除了上面的意思，这个片语还可以表示轮流或是依次、逐一。例如 Each student gave their speeches in turn in front of the class. 每位学生轮流在全班面前演讲。
So emotions and internal systems, there is a relationship between these things, or at least that's what Western medicine is positing implicitly. Interesting. Now, a prime example of this phenomenon is the gut-brain connection. So there you go. I was saying, yeah, I've had a gut feeling, but really it's not totally confined to my gut. Maybe it starts there, but it kind of feels like an intuition, and I feel it in my mind as well, and my emotions are involved. I feel it. So is my gut feeling really a gut feeling? I call it that, and I know what it is, but it's more like an intuition to me. So there you go, a gut-brain connection. That's a prime example of what we're talking about. By the way, a prime example is a really good example of what we're talking about. It really illustrates well what we're trying to talk about.
Yep, an excellent example, a key example of this phenomenon is the gut-brain connection. There is a connection between your brain and your gut, which of course is your belly or your stomach. And the bacteria in the gut, that's always there. There's always bacteria in your stomach. The bacteria in the gut don't just help process food. Remember, bacteria here is a plural noun, so we're using don't. The bacteria don't just help process food. They don't do that. They also produce chemicals called neurotransmitters that regulate your mood. I did not know that. I didn't know bacteria could do that sort of thing, but indeed they help process our food, but they also produce these neurotransmitters, which are things in our nervous system that help speed up the signals between neurons.
Yes, your brain is this big, entangled mass of cells called neurons. It's quite amazing, and all these neurons interconnect. It's amazing, an amazingly complicated thing. And the way that these cells communicate is through neurotransmitters. And apparently neurotransmitters, they allow these cells to communicate, and they also regulate your mood. When we talk about regulate in this particular way, yes, we're talking about not going to extremes. Neurotransmitters regulate your mood. Your mood doesn't get too high. It doesn't get too low. Your mood is moderated or regulated by neurotransmitters.
You might have a system in your home that regulates the temperature. If it gets too hot, it turns on the AC automatically. And if it gets too cold, then it will turn off the AC and maybe turn on the heater. It regulates the temperature. They'll control it. And notably, this gut-brain connection is bidirectional. Notably means that's something that we should pay attention to. This is an important point. So notably, this gut-brain connection goes in two directions, bidirectional. It goes to the brain from the stomach, and it goes from the brain to the stomach as well.
So notably, the gut-brain connection goes both ways. So stress has been found to negatively affect gut bacteria, just as poor gut health can negatively affect a person's mood. How about that? So, a disturbed gut, a gut that's upset, in other words, affects a person's mood, which in turn, or consequently, further affects a person's gut, and so on. Wow, it sounds like a vicious cycle.
Yeah, so basically it's saying that if you're under stress, preparing for a big exam or something, you might get sick to the stomach. Yes, that may have happened to you before. I know something like that has happened to me before. And so I guess you need to make sure that you're not under a lot of stress and make sure that you're eating a good diet so that your brain functions normally. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. Here comes our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。在课文第二段，它有用到 explicit 和 implication 这两个单字。好，它们其实都是来自相同的字根哦。我们来介绍它们的字根吧。好，看到 PLIC 或是 PLI， 看到 PLEX 或是 PLE，还有看到 PLOY 或者是 PLY 这一类的字根呢，就表示折叠、对折、交错等等。好，那么在 explicit 这个字当中， 它的字首 ex 表示向外，那么字根 plic 表示折叠，那么 it 是形容词字尾，向外折叠要怎么联想它的意思呢？假设你有很多同颜色的 T 恤，如果你把正面图案都向外折叠，向外折，这样你一打开衣柜抽屉，是不是就一目了然？你可以知道哪一件是你要的嘛？那我们用这种画面去联想说向外折叠可以看得一清二楚，去联想到 explicit 它有清楚明白、明确表达或是毫不掩饰露骨的意思。好，那么它的相反字是 implicit implicit 它的字首 im 是来自 in， 就带有这种 in into 或是 on upon 的意思，表示在什么之中啊，进入啊，或者在什么上方。那么字根我们刚刚说 plic 表示折叠， it 是形容词字尾。好，当我们把东西折叠在里面，你从外观上看不出来，这样应该可以联想到说 implicit 它是形容这种含蓄的、不明说的。好，接着我们把这个形容词字尾 it 改成名词字尾 ation， 就会得到课文单字咯， implication。 好， implication 它就表示含义、暗指什么什么的意思。我们顺便来补充有这一类字根的单字。第一个来补充 complex 或是 complex。好，这个字首 com 表示一起，字根 plex 表示交错。那同学们试着联想，把很多不同事物交错在一起，是不是会显得很复杂呢？所以 complex 可以用来表达错综复杂的组合，或者是呢，它可以当形容词来形容是复杂的，只是要特别注意发音哦。complex 当名词就是念作这样子，那么当形容词则是念作 complex， 重音不同。好，再来看到第二个补充的是 perplex， 它的字首 per 有完全的意思，那么字根 plex 表示交叠。同学们可以试着想，当你所有的思绪完全交叠在一起，全部都缠绕在一起的话，你就会感到很困惑嘛。所以 perplex 这个动词就表示使什么困惑，使什么费解。我们在 perplex 后面加上名词字尾 ity， 变成 perplexity， 这个名词就表示困惑、迷惘的意思。那么第三个补充的是 deploy， deploy。 好，它的字首 de 表示否定、相反，字根 ploy 表示折叠。那这个字它的字源意思就是 unfold， 展开、展示，所以呢 deploy 这个动词它就是有展开啊、部署的语义。我们刚刚不是说折叠，但是前面又加一个否定字首，你不折了嘛，就把它展开来。好，那这个字呢 deploy 我们刚刚说有部署的意思，它也可以用来指这种物资的调派啊，或是军队的部署。好，以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Gut. Everyone told me he was honest, but my gut reaction was not to trust him. Explicit. He gave us explicit instructions on how to get to his house from the city. Implication. This research has significant implications for public health. Physical. Archie's job requires him to have a lot of physical strength. Prime. This novel is a prime example of Richard Wright's views on race. Regulate. The dam was designed to regulate the flow of water into the lake. Notably. Sue and Dave were notably absent from the meeting. Disturbed. After the car crash, Diane showed signs of disturbed brain function.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you guys enjoyed reading and learning along with us. I am Jeff.
I am Roger.
See you next time.